So good to see everybody. It's time for our September retreat, and it's the first retreat of this autumn training season. I kind of this is actually a system from Buddha Shakyamuni's time, which is because of the seasons in India. But he also thought of training in two training seasons. So autumn training season and spring training season. I kind of learned that style in Japan when I was in monastery many years ago, and I kind of still think that way. Our autumn and spring retreats these days they were 4 or 5 days long for many years, but now it seems like people have wanted to, of course, when people are traveling from different continents or from the other side of Europe for retreats, they want to do a longer retreat, like a week long instead of 4 or 5 days. So that's why our autumn and spring retreats nowadays are also 6-7 days long, which is lovely. But for many years we had summer and winter retreats, like the last big retreat at the end of the training season, that were kind of the main events. But it's actually a good trend that we have more of these 6-7 day retreats. I mentioned training in, back in the day I was in a Zen monastery for a while in Japan, and there we had 1 week long retreat every month, plus also 2 4-day retreats. So it is like in proper training monasteries, training temples. That's the way how training is arranged, that there's a lot of opportunity to do yogic meditative training together. And it's a good trend that also in Amrita Mandala we are heading that way. And then we have these little snacks in between this little 2-day, 2.5 day. Well, it's not really, if I'm perfectly honest. When we have Saturday and Sunday tomorrow, our days are from 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. local time. And, it's not with clear conscience, I can't say that it's full day of training. Well, those of you who have joined these retreats before, you know that, despite that we are doing it's maybe 4 or 5 hours of training tomorrow and the day after, it's still very intense. We have to lie down at least a couple of times, because I like to I like to drive on a full throttle. So even though it's just half a day of training, it's pretty intense. I want to do it that way. And that's actually, that's the tantric way of going about it. I don't think there is any other proper way to do tantric training, because tantric training it's all about transmission. And then when we work with deities or gurus, and there's a teacher or a guru transmitting, kind of magnifying, making the charge bigger for the Sangha, for people, for the group. I've always wanted to give these powerful transmissions, or give transmissions in a way that it leaves no doubts. Why? Because I've seen it so many times in different places, in different sanghas with different teachers, that they don't do it like that. And therefore, doubts and all kinds of samsaric deluded materials in the minds of the students are left lingering in the air. And this is the way I was taught by my gurus, also taught by my teachers. Back in the day, I had two hard teachers, Sivakami, who was American, and then she transmitted a Shaiva Tantra lineage to me of Tirumular's Shaiva Tantra lineage. And then the other of my teachers was Terayama Tanchu Roshi, who was a Japanese Zen master, but he didn't really teach Zen Buddhism like most other Zen masters teach Zen. So he was quite different, very open-minded, unusually open-minded, and just a lovely, lovely person. I wish he was still around. I still miss him, although he passed away 18 years ago already, but I still miss him a lot. Just like I miss Sivakami. But anyway, in their teaching style, there was this, full engagement, like a total engagement. And when it comes to the teacher's engagement to the students, to the Sangha, it means not holding back. So it's because of Sivakami and Terayama Roshi why I teach this way. But mainly, and also because of my Mahasiddha gurus, like Padmasambhava behind me here, Babaji behind here, and many other masters of the Mahasiddha family. Amrita Mandala is very unusual because we have this so-called Mahasiddha family. So there's lots of, as you might know, lots of groups, meditation groups, spirituality groups, meditation teachers who, let's say, they might venerate or study Buddha's teachings, and they also venerate Jesus, and there are these groups that have kind of a bit more open perspective into spirituality or Dharma than just following strictly Buddha's teachings or Christian teachings and what Jesus is said to have said in the Bible. Well, it's actually a good point to make. A few days ago, when I gave the first satsang of this autumn training season, I was, like I always do in the beginning of a training season, that I want to explain, kind of go through the basics, so that people know, kind of a good reminder to everybody that what we are up to here in Amrita Mandala. So in Amrita Mandala we I wouldn't say that I'm a Buddhist. There was a time when I would have said that I'm a Buddhist, but I would rather say that I'm a practitioner of Buddha Dharma. The Dharma, the teachings that Buddha Shakyamuni defined and taught back in his days, and then mystically afterwards also. Shakyamuni Buddha gave teachings mystically, post hominem, after his passing. So anyway, how we practice in Amrita Mandala is according to Buddha Dharma. So Buddha Shakyamuni, he taught the Dharma, gave the teaching in 3 stages. So first turning of the wheel of Dharma, second turning of the wheel of Dharma, and third turning of the wheel of Dharma. I recommend everybody to Google about these 3 turnings. So it's a very clear, like a, how do you say, like a succession, like a pattern, like a sequence, what Buddha Shakyamuni taught in these 3 turnings. And mostly what we see in Buddhism, what Buddhist teachers are mostly focused is the teaching of wisdom or prajna. Wisdom through seeing the emptiness of all phenomena. Emptiness of all phenomena. Emptiness is shunyata in Sanskrit. It's this one of these basic concepts that gets mentioned a lot in Buddhism and Buddhist teachings. If you have attended or attend, you will hear a lot about emptiness and emptiness of all phenomena and wisdom. And it's a very, very important teaching, which, by the way, in Buddhism, they use the term prajna, which is written prajna. It's correctly pronounced prajna. But this prajna is actually just a version of an ancient Sanskrit term called prajnana. And if you're familiar with Buddhism's bigger sibling, Hinduism, they use the term prajnana, but they also just use the shorter term without the pra, and they say jnana yoga, jnana yoga. So, at any case, the same wisdom aspect or knowledge aspect of Dharma has been known since the ancient times. So Buddha Shakyamuni, by all means, wasn't the first one to discover this prajna wisdom or this emptiness. And in Amrita Mandala, you all have probably read the books that I have published. I have published 3 books so far that are all about this prajna or jnana, this emptiness realization, which in other terms means going through these 13 grounds, 13 bhumis, also known as the causal body, which is the subtlest of our bodies, subtlest of our 3 bodies. So Buddha Shakyamuni turned the wheel of Dharma, taught this teaching of reality in 3 stages, 1, 2, and 3. And the first and second turnings are about this emptiness thing. In the first turning, it's the teaching is the same, but the scope of it is less. So on the first turning of the wheel teachings in Hinayana, smaller vehicle, they don't speak about emptiness, they speak of selflessness. And in the second turning of the wheel, they speak of emptiness. But the difference there between selflessness, Anatman, and emptiness is, the difference is in the extent. Is that how you say it? Extent. In the scope of this wisdom realization. But then the third turning of the wheel is completely different than the first 2. Completely different in nature. And it's because relatively few Buddhists ever graduated the first 2 turnings, mastered emptiness, purified their causal body, is why there is, I would say, very little, very little. If you look at Buddhist literature, you can find million books about emptiness, million books about emptiness and compassion, compassion or bodhicitta, that is used as a way to realize emptiness fully, go through this, perfect all these 13 bhumis. So there is very little, compared to that, there is very little material about the third turning of the wheel of Dharma, the so-called Buddhanature teachings. Buddhanature, the Sanskrit term is Tathagata Garbha. Tathagata Garbha. So it is actually kind of interesting that so few Buddhists, relatively few Buddhists, ever graduated emptiness and then had the opportunity to, no longer having that self-delusion that forces, splits the mind in two and makes us see things in dualistic positioning, where there is me here and others there, and this dualistic positioning that then takes action in all kinds of mental and emotional activities. So a very small number of Buddhists got to the end of it, saw the last bus stop of emptiness realization. And that's why, most Buddhists, if you start talking to them about Buddhanature, like it's been expounded by few very significant, highly realized, fully realized masters, they will get very upset. Because things don't look after emptiness realization at all the same like it did before that. So the way how we feel about ourselves, the way how we feel and look at the world and things around us, is completely different. Pre-emptiness and post-emptiness discovery, very different. So, they are my favorite masters of the Buddhanature, Tathagata Garbha teachings come from this Jonang school of Tibetan Buddhism, Jonang school. And they have this so-called Shentong view. Shentong view, it's simply, Shentong is Tibetan. I don't know what the term is in Sanskrit. I don't know if anybody knows. At least I haven't seen it anywhere translated into Sanskrit. But it's simply the view of this Buddhanature. And in the spring of 2024, I led a number of sessions. These recordings can be found from my YouTube channel. I gave a number of sessions of mainly two Jonang masters called Dolpopa and Taranatha. I'll read you a short quote by Dolpopa. In this pure emptiness, the Buddhas attain the highest self, which is non-self. Therefore, because they have attained the pure self, they arrive at the greatness of self. So because of realizing emptiness of self, realizing this emptiness, selflessness of all phenomena, then you have an opportunity to arrive at the greatness of self. Greatness of self. So it's an interesting thing that emptiness process. It's negation. It's deconstruction. It's deconstruction of this self-structure that we have built, that we have accumulated over our lives, and possibly many, many lives. So we have simply accumulated this sense of self, me, meanness, I-ness, in many situations throughout our lives since we were small children. So this sense of self and this belief in this separate, individually existing entity called self, it sneaks, sneaks behind us, sneaks on us over time. And then, why it is problem is because, it is a delusion and we believe in it. So it is things in our mind and in our psyche are not running naturally, are not flowing naturally. So, we accumulate, we create this sense of self, and we believe in it. We believe in this separately from others existing self. And it causes us pain. That's why it's a problem, because it causes us pain. It's the root cause of delusion and suffering. Suffering is a translation of a Sanskrit word dukkha. Dukkha can also be translated as pain. So this existential pain. And it, you have probably read those books, starting with Awake, Handbook of Awakening book, where I have explained these things in detail from the beginning. So, as you know, this false sense of self, it comes and goes in our daily lives, during the day, during the night, as different thoughts, memories, ideas, plans come and go through our minds, come and go through our psyches. Then there is this, momentarily there is this strong sense of self, this I-ness, this me-ness. And that's the root cause of samsaric existence. Samsaric existence means cyclical, that something repeats over and over. Something repeats, and it repeats itself in a painful, you could say also destructive, in a unhealthy manner. So to remove that root cause is why Jnana Yoga and Pragya Yoga, like Buddha called it, why this category of yogas, to remove that existential root cause of existential pain, is why this emptiness meditation, vipassana meditation, analytical meditation, wisdom practice exists. And again, this is the main topic of the first and second turnings of the wheel of Dharma. But what then, when you no longer have that cause of delusion? And when I say cause, it's not actually just one, it is, the flavor of self-delusion, the taste, the feel, the energetic feel and taste of this I-ness, me-ness, that creates the separation and creates the confusion inside us. It's the same. whether we are talking a gross sense of self, subtle sense of self, or very subtle sense of self. So when it is gross, like very apparent, when we work with boomy terrain, let's say 1 through 6, you're working with this gross sense of self. It's very apparent. But then the same sense of self, it kind of changes flavor. So it becomes subtler. But it still smells and tastes and feels the same. Smells and tastes of. And then after that subtle sense of self, there is very subtle. So then that feel and texture of the self-delusion becomes even more finer. And that's why it's called very subtle delusion. So in Amrita Mandala we are very fortunate because we have these practices that allow us to go quickly through the process of bhumi openings and then bhumi perfections. Very quickly. Like myself, I'm the slowest of the 23 people in the Sangha who have gone through the process. And the reason for that is because, I can't really use myself as an example of Amrita Mandala method's efficacy because, I didn't have these tools that you have. So I've had to create the method as I go along, as I go through these different stages. But in my case, it lasted from the opening of the first to the perfection of 10th and 13th. It lasted 10 years and a few months. And then at shortest, I think James from Canada I think he's the quickest. How long was it? Year and a couple of months? Something like that?
I feel it was almost 2 years, I think.
Okay.
And then also Sylvia, Kripa.
Yeah. Okay, so Kripa, Sylvia and James have gone through it in... I kind of remember that for James it took like only a year and a little bit more.
Yeah.
Year and 2-3 months.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So compared to him, Kripa, who is here visiting us from Switzerland, she was slow because for her it only took 2 years. But my point is that even my 10 years is extremely fast to go through those, through this whole range of emptiness realization. You might have seen me refer in my talks and in my writings to different traditions and both past and living teachers and masters. But to go through the emptiness stages, first of all to establish this effortless, natural basic awareness, open the 11th bhumi in matter of months. It is very, very exceptional. It really, you cannot find, there's only less than a handful of people from other traditions, some of whom I've met personally, some of whom I've invited to come and teach at our centers through the years. There's only a handful of people like that. But then to have the full scope of emptiness realization in matter of few years, whether it's 2 years or 5 years or 10 years, that is very, very, very unusual, exceptional. And it doesn't, when I say that, there's how do you say, like a bit of an irony there, because the irony is that it doesn't make any of us special. It's the opposite way. It's the opposite way. So in realization of a gradual realization of emptiness through the bhumis, what we discover is exactly the opposite of being special. It's this wonderful ordinariness, just with a sober head, with a softer heart, with softer energy, but just not having that, how to say, compulsive sense of self, how to say, claiming, possessing, owning. That's the whole point of emptiness realization. So what I was talking about. So in Amrita Mandala, because of our practices, back in the day, over 15 years ago, one of my masters, Babaji here, he asked me to collect the bits and pieces of wisdom practices that were scattered around different traditions, to collect these bits and pieces together in a coherent way, and also him and a number of my masters, they have given me practices that have been completely lost from the face of the earth. So that's the way how I've put Amrita Mandala together. And it's because of that why this is possible. Why it's possible for Kripa to go through the emptiness stages in 2 years. Or Rani, how long did it take for you from the first bhumi?
From the first bhumi opening, it
Yes.
took 7 years, but I started practicing daily in 2019.
Yeah, but just say the year.
Yeah,
7 years.
It was 7 years.
7
from the
years.
First opening.
Yeah. But she was lazy when she was practicing. She wasn't always practicing. But anyway, 7 years for a lazy practitioner, it's an outstanding result. Yeah, so it's the practices that we have are different. To a large degree, same or similar, but also significantly different. Like dynamic concentration, shouting of syllables. There was one Pure Land Buddhist lineage in Japan that did it until 2002, when their head priest passed away, and then they stopped doing it. They had been doing it for hundreds and hundreds of years. Then the only other still existing group or lineage that does it is, it's a mixture of Buddhism and Shintoism in Japan, called Ichikukai Dojo in Tokyo. That's where I trained a little over 20 years ago, and that's where I got the idea of rhythmical shouting practice. But as far as I know, and I think I have a pretty accurate understanding of the situation, Amrita Mandala and Ichikukai in Tokyo are the only ones where we do rhythmical shouting. In Tibet, in different, it's mainly like Tibetan Nyingma Chokchen tradition where shouting is done. But I have never heard Nyingmas shout more than 3 syllables. 3 shouts. 3 syllables. But it's a very different practice when you do 50 or 150 or 500, as you know. And this is one of the main differences. Like when you combine dynamic practice with bodhicitta, not even sky is the limit, figuratively speaking. It just keeps punching through all these layers in our subtle body, all these so-called bhumis, these grounds, these layers. It's that simple. Something that I have recently discussed in the context of revitalized Zen. Shouting syllables loudly for extended periods of time was a pretty common practice in Japanese Zen Buddhism. But they stopped doing that in many places in 1950s, 1960s. And that practice was never, as far as I know, transmitted to the West. But they had also been doing it for hundreds of years before that. So I don't know, I don't know what's up with that, but unfortunately, this practice is unknown and unheard to most people out there. But it's so helpful. So maybe a few more words about this third turning of the wheel of Dharma. This, like I said, that post-emptiness, after emptiness realization, things start looking very different, because the causes of delusion in gross, subtle, very subtle form, the self is gone. Self is not there anymore. So it makes possible that we are present in an effortless manner most of the time. I didn't say all of the time, because we still have the other one of the two subtle bodies to work through. And that can be my experience, having had a complex trauma, developmental, psychological trauma. It can be extremely difficult, really difficult to go through these habits and patterns of trauma. But my point is that it gives like a foundation, like a ground, this emptiness realization that we just see ourselves and things in a very different way. Maybe I'll come back to that Dolpopa quote again. In this pure emptiness, the Buddhas attain the highest self, which is non-self. Therefore, because they have attained the pure self, they arrive at the greatness of self. Greatness of self. In his, what is it called? Mountain Dharma, Mountain Doctrine, his magnum opus, his main work of Dharma teaching, he uses different terms. He uses the term self or Atman. He uses the term Atman. That's a Hindu term. Buddhists shy away from that term. Like Buddhists get very upset if you start speaking Atman to them. And that's actually the reason why Dolpopa and the Jonang school that he was part of, was banned in Tibet. Was banned. Was banned because they didn't have emptiness realization to understand Dolpopa and others like him. But Dolpopa used the term self, Atman, true self, universal self, and many others like it. Have you heard it ever in Buddhist context? I hadn't for many years that I had studied Buddhism. So to me, I got familiar with that self or Atman through Kriya Yoga, through practicing Hinduism. But it wasn't until when I had realized emptiness and then discovered Dolpopa when it made sense. It finally made sense. Like Babaji told me back in the day that, what was his exact quote? He said that there is no this or that yoga. There is only teachings that are, can't remember the exact quote, but he meant that there are only teachings that are according to reality, and then, how to say, unaccording to reality. Basically, he said that there is a teaching that is correct and incorrect. So, like I said, very, very few Buddhists ever make it to the end of emptiness realization and then have an opportunity to see with or get a very different perspective like Dolpopa, Taranatha and others like them had. But yeah, there is this Lama Dan Brown, this American Lama who passed away a few years ago. He spoke of this only having positive qualities. None of the destructive or disruptive qualities, but only having positive qualities. And it doesn't mean like being happy all the time. You know, that's kind of a trap. If we aim at being happy all the time, then we are stuck with happiness. It means that the free flow of emotions, free flow of reactions, whatever the emotional reactions are, whatever the ideas or associations in the mind are, total free flow of all of it. Without a small sense of self, without a great sense of self. Just natural flow. Natural flow. And never destructive, never disruptive, never chaotic, never erratic. Even when I thought of Jesus, when he had been training for many years in the East, and then he came back, awake, fully realized, fully enlightened, and then, like Bible says, he saw the merchants in the church or temple selling stuff, and then he got enraged by it. How dare you, bastards! And then he threw the tables over, get out. But even when he had that reaction, not destructive, didn't create a what's that word? Didn't create a identification with a small sense of self. He wasn't pushing this reaction, this how do you say, discrimination-based reaction of reacting to this situation where religion or dharma was presented in a wrong, greedy manner. Didn't get off center. Didn't get confused. Didn't have to calm himself down and harmonize his energy and collect his energy after that. That's what I mean by free flow. Free flow. Our problem as samsaric beings is that there is this sense of self that comes and goes, creates a tightness, creates uncomfortable sense of being tied into a knot, like this pressure, unnatural pressure, and then also this selfishness from the astral body, from the meridian system, reactions from there, isn't it? That when something happens in our daily lives, we get upset and angry about something. Can be something totally ridiculous, something small, insignificant, or can be like a big fight with our friends or spouses or mothers, fathers, children. And then, we feel, get red in the face. Pulse goes up, 170 BPM or something like that. Can be very angry, and we feel our energy gets totally scattered. And that's why we get tired. But there is a way to experience frustration, anger, all of these things without any of that hooking, attachment, identification happening. I came to think of another quote. I don't have it now at hand, but I will find the quote from this Lady Master for you for tomorrow, that well explains this free flow of emotions and energies. But my point is that there is a very false presentation of happiness, both in Buddha Dharma and in spirituality, that you kind of aim at this happiness to achieve happiness. It's very one-sided. That's the problem with it. We also in Amrita Mandala, we do happiness practices, but that's because of healing trauma. But as such, happiness as a state, it is just another state, just another emotional experience. And if you want to land on it and stay on it, stay happy, everybody can realize that it's going to be a problem, because you cannot stay with any of these even positive emotions. But when we remove habits of selfishness, of course trauma also, whether you have little bit of trauma or a lot of trauma, it gives birth to lots of negativity in different forms. Lots of negativity. So when you work through that, the whole chunk of it, when you work through this self-delusion and realize emptiness, then gradually we are becoming freer and freer of these shackles. Becoming more and more ourselves. Discovering ourselves. Becoming authentic in that sense. And there is no other way to practice yoga or Buddha Dharma than through first-hand experience, through first-hand realization. There is no other way. There is no such way of Dharma practice of, just reading books and understanding philosophies mentally. That's not Dharma practice. Dharma practice is through flesh and bone. That's the beauty of it. In those sessions that I taught a year and a half ago, in the spring of 2024, when I saw Dolpopa make the connection, not only staying with the emptiness or second turning of the wheel of Dharma, but taking the natural And now I feel obvious next step of this Buddhanature. And he called it, as you heard me, he called it self, Atman, true self. That's when I went, aha, of course. That's what God is. You know, many siddhas, mahasiddhas, and many advanced practitioners of Hinduism, different swamis, yogis, for thousands of years, far longer than Buddhists. You know, Hinduism has existed for, I don't know, 30,000 years, maybe 40,000 years, something like that. Nobody knows. But I'm just coming up with some figure. But then I realized that, oh, yes, something that I had experienced in my Kriya Yoga practice for many years, but I just wasn't able to make the connection that is naturally there, because I was stuck with theoretical views. So then when I saw Dolpopa's writings about Buddhanature, true self, Atman, I realized, oh, that's a complete image right there. And that it explains what Hindu authors haven't been able to do. It explains it gives like a full, close as the full circle. So, covers the causal body, covers the astral body, and in that way covers the whole terrain of us, ourselves. And I just want to remind, because I said the word God, I'm not talking about the rigid definition of Christian God. I'm talking about the God who is in all of us. God that is love. God that is intelligence. Our intelligence. In all beings. I'm not talking about God who is favorable for Christians and then kind of doesn't like the others. That same divine divinity, God, is the foundation of everything. All life, all philosophies, all religions, all practices. So I'm kind of talking about a bit different God that you might have heard discussed in churches. Or God who I, as a boy, heard about in Russian Orthodox Church. So I'm talking about the God of yogis, maybe you could say. Kind of mature view of God. So anyway, I led these God as Buddhanature, Buddhanature as God sessions a year and a half ago. And I think that, well, it depends with these retreats. It depends what we practice. It depends what you tell me or what you ask me. But if not on this weekend retreat, this autumn, this is my main topic of teachings. This God. God is the main topic, which is the same as Buddhanature, which is the same as Atman, self. And that's a very important point. I'm not talking about God apart from us or somewhere on top of a cloud or somewhere in the kingdom of heaven apart from us. I'm talking about God in ourselves. And that's the beauty of it. That always was the beauty of it, but was distorted. Was God has been mispresented, isn't it? You know, mispresented by religions. So yes, you are welcome to comment, welcome to tell me experiences what you have during these sessions. You're welcome to ask questions, whatever they might be, I will be happy to answer in the best of my ability. All right, let's start practicing.